Welcome, everyone, to another edition of a very insightful conversation on people at work, driven by data, distributed by design. I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming to this conversation Krish Shankar. Krish is a leader in human resource thinking and is the group head of HR for Infosys. And in his role, as you can imagine, a huge role, he is dealing with massive change in this digital world, as well as leading a huge number of employees in a very large organization to a great future. So welcome, Krish, for this conversation, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we are very, very proud to present this conversation to everyone because Krish has agreed to join this important conversation with us. So again, our larger subject matter is people at work, driven by data, distributed by design. But today we will explore a particular theme in it, and that is about HR going platform. We'll try to see some implications of what happens when HR goes platform. When 70, 80, 90% of people are working from home, we think HR will go platform. And today, Krish will help us navigate through what are the implications of it. So let me start, Krish, first of all, by this core idea of HR going platform. What do you think about it? Do you think that will happen? To what extent? And what are the highest level implications?
Oh, thanks, Nalin. It's good to be chatting with you on this. And thank you for this opportunity. If you look at it, there are two things that's happening. One, I think we're going to have more and more people working remotely, yeah, in a way, a hybrid kind of a remote. So therefore, there are more people working there. Number two, there's more technology that's available, which is really coming in different forms that is available for us. Yeah, when you look at both these, when you put both these together, what's going to happen is we're going to see much more of our employee experience or employee touch points become more digital, or we're going to have more technology being used there. And we're going to see most of the routine operations would now become much more digital for people to really kind of do it when they want it, where they want it. So therefore, that's going to be a key kind of a drive. And therefore, in the past, there was a lot of work that was done, through people, through the HR business partners, through, various managers face to face. And some of that will shift and become much more digital. So I think, yes, if I look at a trend, yes, there is going to be a greater shift towards many of our HR operating things. Any service that anybody wants, whether it's a manager or an employee, will move a little more to the digital space. Yeah. So therefore, if you want to use the word platform, yes, maybe it'll become much more digitized in that form. I don't know. That's what I feel. I think you earlier we used to have all our shared service centers, which used to do a lot more calls and those kind of things. And while some of the calls will still remain, a lot more will become digital, a lot more will be on the mobile. And we've seen that over the last, even the last 8-9 months, as we've seen people doing it. The acceptance and adoption of many of these has increased a lot. So clearly, yes, HR, a lot of touch points in HR will become more digital.
So, Krish, I absolutely think that the word digital is probably as important as platform. And when things go digital, there is a lot of, ability to collect data and improve your outcomes. And one of the conclusions we are, I think, reaching is that when HR goes platform, actually the HR organization may also shift and change. And one of the key trends within that shift and change, we think, is that there may be more centers of excellence. And not just more centers of excellence, but the role of centers of excellence may also change from just being transactional, like you said, shared services, but more forward thinking also. And that will imply change for the role of the HR business partners. How do you react to that?
I think it's a very, very good point. And there's going to be, I would say, changes in two levels here, Nalin. If you look at how traditionally any HR function is organized, you have what we call as the centers of excellence or expertise. And these were much more, much more conceptual, much more designing solutions like compensation or learning. So these were the centers of excellence, or OD, those the leadership development. So you had these three or four key things that were centers of excellence. Then we had the HR business partners who were just running the show, working with the business and managing the day-to-day operations. And then we had the HR shared services, which was actually doing all the operations, the payroll, the call centers, and various other things supporting this whole thing. So that's broadly the three key pillars: the centers of expertise or excellence, the business partners, and the HR shared service. So when I look at this and this move towards lots more being digital touch points, what's going to happen is that, as you said, there may be newer centers of excellence. And for example, one key center of excellence would be what I would call as employee experience, because that's going to be very important, because you're going to look at the both the digital, the physical, whatever it is, it's going to be much more important there. So you're going to have some of those. You're going to have maybe a much more deeper focus on this man-machine interface. So these whole automation and these social impacts of that. So that could be another centers of excellence. So those are some areas. But I think they still remain as solution, as design. What will happen is many of the work that the HR business partners are doing, some of them will go and move on to what we call as the HR shared service center. And that will become much more, that will take on a lot more through this platform, through more digital offerings. So yes, the HR centers of excellence will expand. You'll have a couple of new ones, which will really have to ensure that in the new world, in a remote working world, we are able to really architect our whole processes and make them work well. At the same time, I think we're going to have much more things moving to these platforms, and therefore much more of the work that the HR business partners were doing would now become digital or taken through these, shared services and our platforms. So I think those would be the kind of shifts that I see happening, in line with what you mentioned.
No, that's a very clear laying out of the three areas and how they will evolve. In fact, what you mentioned, new centers of excellence, Krish, we actually also think exactly that the new center of excellence will be employee experience, which will be based on maybe principles of user experience, but also data and analytics, we think. And so we think that there will be new centers of excellence, and centers of excellence will become more forward thinking. And finally, maybe our HR business leaders will be able to have the ability to play the strategic role that they've been wanting to play for so many years. So our findings actually are in line with exactly what you're saying. But let me pick on the point of employee experience. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, that's right.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
data is also analytics is another key one. You're right. I think that's something, because you're going to have lots more data coming out of it. Data about the work, data about the employee, and I think data where action has to be taken by the employee and the action has to be taken by the organization or the managers. And how do you really create all of that and thinking about it? I think that will have to be done by each of the centers of expertise or excellence, along with somebody who really helps them think about this whole data. So that's going to be critical as we think about this new way of how we're going to run, how this whole employee experience will be designed. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, exactly the point that you just said, which is that somebody will have to help the centers of excellence on how the data capture and the data organization and the data insights, rather, will be used for future. So we actually are saying in our paper that the data and analytics center of excellence will be a center of excellence for centers of excellence.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
similarly, employee experience will be a center of excellence for centers of excellence, because when you are designing a capability program or a training program, what is the best, coolest user experience? You may need another center of excellence to help you do that. So that's where that lines up. And in fact, we also think that maybe our thinking will shift from processes to experiences. So, people keep saying hire to retire cycle, which is kind of thinking a handoff of various processes, but we may have to maximize experiences at each point. But on the subject of experience, and you started that in the earlier part of our conversation, this idea of employee experience, that's a big one. That's a big issue, which will be discussed a lot, I think, now. in distributed and remote workforce. So talk to us a little bit more on what you think on employee experience and the role of tech and the intersection with culture. Broadly, where are your thoughts on that?
No, I think, see, I think what's going to happen is one of the key things we need to do with people being much more digital, much more remote, is to really look at the employee experience at every touch point, everything that the employee is interacting with, both in a digital interface or with, in a kind of a virtual thing. And how do you really make that work for the employee? Uh, this shift is also going to put two challenges for us. I think the first challenge is all about culture. In the traditional world, I think culture was really created by what do you call a lot of physical kind of the physical settings played a big part. The conference rooms, the buildings, and there's a little bit about the artifacts that people could see physically, and the leaders, the presence of leaders, in various meetings and various other things. So these were very two strong things that really built the culture. Now, in the digital world, we got to say what are some of those artifacts that we're going to use to really build this culture? How do we define your culture, and what could be those digital kind of symbols or artifacts that will be kind of evocative of your culture? So that's going to be very important, and we got to bring your culture alive, but in a kind of a new environment. So you got to think about it. You got to think about the various experiences that people go through, which really is part of your culture. So therefore, that's one key thing that we got to really look at. The second thing is, as people work a little more remotely, I think one of the things they miss is this learning from peers. This learning from somebody sitting next across you, on simple things, and also this sense of community. And just to take that further, I think we've got to start building a lot more communities for people to in the digital world that people can use. Small things, communities on how can I get some hacks for improving some of the things that I need, or communities on various things. How do you really kind of create? And therefore, that's going to be another key thing that we got to build in this whole employee experience kind of a thing. So I think as we look at as every company, I mean, you have your own value proposition. You say this is your EVP, and these are the two or three key elements of it. We got to now say, okay, how's that EVP going to look like in this new world, in this new digital or a platform kind of world, and we got to start thinking about it. So I think those are some additional areas we got to think of as we look at our employee experience.
Now, this is the idea of artifacts of culture will change in the new world is is a good insight for us to make a move forward. For example, the new artifact, you didn't say it, but I think you meant it, it may be digital communities, right? And these communities are different from teams. So, it's not like an HR team or a operations team. These communities may go across organization segments and maybe communities of interest. And actually, digital marketing does a lot of work on communities, especially when they do research and things like that. So maybe there's something to learn from there, and that's something also we are exploring. But overall, I think this idea of culture and employee experience will dramatically shift. And I think where we will absolutely land is that you mentioned the presence of leaders, which was a great thing, but also might happen is there may be slight softening of the force of hierarchy. Because when you're digital, things become a little more democratized and equal. So I think that
Yeah,
also may be an impact on culture. So yeah,
absolutely. I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, you
No,
had
I
a
agree.
point.
I think you're right. That will see one of the things that people say is that there's also while there is a softening of hierarchy, but there's also a lot of learning that people get when they interact with leaders, when they kind of So therefore, how do you really build that, and how do you bring that across? So that'll be another thing for us to really look at. And I think this will also open up. People are much more conscious of time. Meetings are much better. So I think this digital world brings along its own pluses, its own discipline. I think that will also help. So therefore, in addition to softening the hierarchy, it also creates a little more kind of, much more what do you call, an orderliness of processes and orderliness of meetings, which
Right.
really helps in some ways.
Yeah. So I think that may be a great point to have a end to our very productive but short but productive conversation. This idea that there'll be some orderliness in how we interact with each other, and if we bring that as one positive, the softening of hierarchy is another positive, and the ability to make data-driven decisions which help employees and organizations at the third positive, we can actually look forward to this new people at work reality, distributed people at work reality with optimism. And yeah, so I at least think, and our teams think, that we should look at it with optimism because there's a huge progress just waiting for us around the corner. So thank you very much, Krish, for joining this conversation. It has been absolutely wonderful to hear your insights, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear from you more. So do join, and Krish will be joining us in our panel discussion, which we'll have on October 28th on people at work, driven by data, distributed by design. Do join us, and we look forward to meeting you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nalin.
Thanks, Krish.